which were unfortunately unable to resist because the radicals of the New Left trained themselves in the streets with knives, guns, bombs, disguises, sticks, and batons. I mean, these were tough people. They had been trained for Marxist-Leninist revolution. And so they were able to really bowl over your genial, HR director who has a wife and kids and some hobbies on the weekend. They were able to just brutalize the kind of weak and passive, humanities professor that was occupying some third-rate department at a second-tier state school. So that guy is easily pushed aside. And then they hire their friends, and then they hire their friends' friends, and then it becomes an orthodoxy. And so that process over decades creates an orthodoxy, creates a mechanism for enforcing the orthodoxy, and then creates a snowball effect where they're able to then take over some of the higher positions within these institutions. And even if they don't take them over directly, they're able to exert enough pressure on what are fundamentally weak leaders of American institutions that their will is done either directly or indirectly through their proxies.
Of these four characters that you profile, while in educational circles, Paulo Freire is, of course, very, very well known. I think he's the most cited, educational scholar in those texts. But he's not known as to be a revolutionary figure, at least I think by most people, and maybe even some of the people who have been reading his work.
So Paulo Freire, for those who are not familiar, is a Brazilian neo-Marxist theoretician of education. So he was what is known as a critical pedagogist, applying the critical theories to pedagogy or the practice of teaching. In this case, in K through 12 schools, as we think of them now. And he was born in Brazil. He was ejected from Brazil after a military coup. If you look at him now, Paulo Freire is the third most cited author in the social sciences. He's the number one most assigned text in graduate schools of education. And he is the single most influential theorist for American scholars of education practice that train classroom teachers. And that is a shocking thing. But what's really lost, and what I tried to convey in the book in great detail, is the middle part. Okay, he is a Brazilian neo-Marxist. He has the theory of critical consciousness, the theory of knowledge, the oppressor-oppressor distinction, educating students into their own oppression so they can take revolutionary action. Okay, great. That's his basic theory. And then on the backside, and he's very influential in college campuses in the United States in 2020, 2023. But his life story is very interesting and very indicative because after he fled Brazil, he spent, over the course of multiple decades, he traveled through third world countries in Latin America and Africa, advising Marxist-Leninist revolutionary fighters and then governments on how to design their education programs. Paulo Freire was the one who said that the Cultural Revolution in China, he said this in the late 70s or early 80s, well after the record was known. He said it was the most genial solution of the century. So after the bodies were counted, after the kind of mass violence was documented, he still said it was good. And in his work in Africa, in the third world, working with Marxist-Leninist revolutionaries who had revolted against the colonial powers, he was their lead education propagandist. And in one country where he worked most extensively and for which we have the greatest documentation, a country called Guinea-Bissau on Africa's west coast, he was in charge of the educational programs. He traveled in the country. He advised its revolutionary dictator. He designed the pedagogical materials. He trained the teachers at their kind of schools of education, kind of rudimentary. But scholars went back into the archives and said, well, did Paulo Freire's theories actually work? And they discovered something shocking, maybe, or maybe poetic. They discovered that his theories, in effect, taught nobody how to read. They were totally unsuccessful in teaching any of these poor people in this third world country how to gain basic literacy. And so his work functions as propaganda, but doesn't provide knowledge, doesn't provide education, doesn't even provide basic literacy. And so then the question is, wait a minute, if he is working with third world Marxist-Leninist dictators, he has total control over the system, he implements the system, and it teaches nobody how to read, why are we following his ideas in the United States today? And that's a very important question that has to be answered.
I mean, not only are we following them, I mean, that's kind of the bedrock of the educational system in a way, isn't it?
In some ways, you could say that. It is the implicit ideology of many of the graduate schools of education, and it has absolutely trickled down into the pedagogies and curricula in many K through 12 systems around the country. I think he's actually directly cited still to this day in California's model ethnic studies curriculum. I believe he was at one time during certain drafts the first citation as the kind of inspiration for California's new statewide racialist curriculum. And so he is a pivotal figure in American life, and he is a hidden figure in American life. Maybe Angela Davis was the most well-known for people of a certain age, but these are what I think of as the hidden rulers of American life. With the exception of Angela Davis, they're all deceased now, but their ideas live on with our institutions. And so I think it's important to actually excavate them. None of them, with the exception of Freire in an academic text, none of them have received biographical treatments.
We'll hear more from the state and local leaders. As the summer break ends, school buses and children return to school. We'll speak to a first responder about back-to-school safety and what to look out for, whether you're a parent, student, or in the neighborhood. NTV's David Lamb reports.
Drive slow, observe the speed limit, and put away that cell phone.
That is one of the safety points Chief Sam DiGiovanna points out as students return to school this month. In California, school zones may have speed limits from 15 to 25 miles per hour when within 500 feet of a school when children are present. DiGiovanna talks about situational awareness of surroundings.
What should parents be on the lookout for?
Parents can calm their child's nerves because they're going to be nervous by being calm and organized themselves. This will set the tone for the children, so if parents are calm, their children will be calm. When you approach a bus and the yellow lights are flashing, that means that the red lights are about to flash. That means children will be onboarding and offboarding. When the red lights flash, it's law in every state to stop behind the bus. Once the red lights stop flashing, you can proceed around the bus, but use caution to make sure that no kids are running out from behind the bus or in front of the bus.
In July, state agencies held a Better Slow Than Sorry campaign in Los Angeles. According to a press release, 35% of all deadly crashes in California in 2021 were speed-related. Nationally, there was an 8% increase in speed-involved crashes from 2020 to 2021. Authorities want people to be aware near work and school zones when many people are present.
Well, it's important to stop behind the crosswalk, never block them, and refrain from honking your horn or revving your motor.
The chief said to advise children not to accept rides from strangers and that parents are the best teachers when it comes to safety. In Santa Clara, California, David Lamb, NTD News.
The governor plans to promote educational freedom. He promises to allow parents to participate in children's learning and create a safe campus without political censorship. But critics say existing laws would infringe on parental rights.
Governor Gavin Newsom and first partner Jennifer Siebel Newsom announced California's Family Agenda on Monday, aimed at promoting educational freedom.
We believe in children's right to thrive. We believe in parents' rights to decide and support their kids. We believe that kids have the right to learn and the right to succeed.
It consists of 4 factors: freedom to decide, freedom to thrive, freedom to learn, and freedom to succeed. It would allow parents to participate in children's learning, create a safe campus, and offer healthy meals and mental health care. It also guarantees the freedom to learn without political censorship. This comes after Murrieta and Chino Valley school districts voted to notify parents if their child identifies as transgender in school. When Newsom was asked about his stance on the school district's policies, he mostly evaded it, but hinted there could be legislation revolving around it.
We're working with legislative leaders. I'll be meeting with the speaker and the pro tem this evening. We'll be discussing it. I know that the LGBT caucus has got some language they're working on. I haven't had the privilege of looking at it. It's a work in progress.
On the same day, a group of parents and organizations held a press conference at the state capitol to criticize a list of bills that they say infringes on parental rights.
These bills are unconstitutional, illegal, they deprive you of fundamental rights, and they need to be stopped today.
One is AB 1078, where the state would set a school curriculum, regardless if it's age appropriate or fits the local community values, which means if a parent or district finds a book inappropriate, the school cannot remove it because it's material that's inclusive or diverse.
The message was clear. Their goal was to break up the family unit and to take control of our children.
We know what's best for our kids. I'm not going to have a school district or a government agency tell us what they should teach in the schools.
Other bills getting called out are AB 5, which would require school staff to be trained on transitioning students and how to hide their gender identity from parents, and AB 665, which would allow children as young as 12 to consent themselves to mental health treatment. It would allow the minor to leave home and go to government residential shelters without their parents' or guardians' consent for any reason. State lawmakers are set to hear these bills this upcoming legislative session.
As we just heard, teachers could be required to tell parents if their child identifies as a transgender at 2 California schools. This contradicts state guidance. We now go to NTD's Jack Bradley with the details.
2 Southern California School District Board President Sonia Shah, who modeled her district's policy after Assembly Bill 1314, written by Assemblyman Asali.
There is a lot of things in Sacramento trying to divide the families, and it has to do with even the education. I feel like they're using education as a pathway, and we see our Department of Ed, we see the bills coming down. A lot of it has to do with the sexualization and the confusion towards our children. So with this, it kind of pushes back, and it shows Sacramento we're not going to stand for what they're doing. So to me, it was putting safeguards in place because secrets should never be kept from the parent. And we all know that there's things in our, that are being pushed and twisted, and narratives being pushed by the Department of Ed and the people making these bills that want to divide the family. And this brings transparency back. It wasn't this particular policy also was something near and dear to Chino Valley, because as I walked as a candidate, I was listening to the concerns. So this bill actually addresses those concerns that were voiced in the community when I was walking and knocking on the doors. So I think it was just a great, solid policy. I never thought in a million years notifying the parent of something intimate about their child would be controversial, but here we are today.
Can you elaborate more on what the parents were saying to you in regards to this kind of policy?
Absolutely. So the parents wanted transparency with a lot of things. Right now we have kids, it's really sad because we have kids that are saying they're fluid. They go from one gender to the next. There's a lot of things that, are being pushed down with curriculum that confuse the kids with the genders. So this policy will now bring the parent back in the picture if those things are, the child's experiencing any of those things. So to me, when it came to a point of being able to make a policy to bring the parent back in the picture, that's why this policy was so important to us. And the parents voiced that when I was walking. They voiced that they want to know things about their child. And prior to the last, 4 or 5 years, it was always the school districts working alongside with the parents. I mean, if the kid gets a bump, we're calling the parents. If the kid, throws up at school, you're calling the parents. If the kid got a bad grade or has behavioral issues, you call the parents. I don't understand why something like this would be an exception. I think it's really sad that they're trying to make exceptions, and it just shows their narrative and their direction and their push and their agenda.
Shah says more school boards across California are considering implementing similar policies.
We'll now take a short break, everyone, but here's a look at what we have for you when we come right back.
In manufacturing, or whether it's in capital and financing, they're seeking any opportunity they can to make money in China, and are going to continue to do so. You saw Intel announcing this $2.5 billion new plant in China earlier this year, after being one of the large American businesses that benefited from the CHIPS Act, which Congress passed last year, giving a bunch of money to corporations for the manufacturing of semiconductors and other things, in the United States. And so you see that even though our government is trying to influence business activity for the better and help American businesses, continue to outpace CCP-linked ones and continue Western dominance in technology, etc. These very same businesses are still seeking to be benefiting from China at the same time, which is, again, a concern. And I don't think they've fully learned their lesson yet. And I think this EO, has provided a bit maybe of a scare, perhaps, but at the same time, the technicalities of it actually don't do anything yet. There is no change that is imposed or enforced or required for business behavior yet. And so I think there's a lot of businesses crying wolf a bit before the wolf has shown up.
Robbie Saunders, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
What are some of the effects of AI technology at the workforce and its broader implications? To find out more, we spoke to Professor Ifeoma Ajunwa, author of The Quantified Worker and professor at Emory Law School. Professor Ifeoma Ajunwa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, I want to get your thoughts on the impact that AI is having on humanity, really. There's been discussion and speculation of the impacts and what they might have on the workforce. But now that AI is becoming more prominent, are we starting to see real-world effects?
Oh, certainly. I mean, we've had AI work technologies for quite some time now. Even before ChatGPT, we had AI that was used to surveil workers. We had AI that was used to check for productivity for workers. And those AI technologies all have had an impact. In fact, there was a recent case against a prominent company, Workaday, alleging that its AI technology used for hiring was actually showing discriminatory effects against Black applicants, disabled applicants, and other minorities.
Wow. If you could elaborate on that, and, I guess when it comes to regulating AI or not regulating it, what are some of the other dangers we face?
So when it comes to AI, we definitely face the danger of misinformation or disinformation. We've certainly seen that with ChatGPT, where we've had people using it and it returning results that are just completely false, or returning even hallucinated citations for articles that don't exist. So there's that issue of misinformation. Then there's also the issue of discrimination. And AI is really only as good as the information or data that it was trained on. So when you have an AI that has been trained on incomplete or biased data, then that AI will also return biased results or incomplete results that could impact segments of the population, say, people with disabilities or other minorities.
So highlighting your point, artificial intelligence is obviously, as we've seen, as you've just spoken about, it is highly intelligent, but after all, it is also artificial. So do we risk losing the human touch on things which is actually more valuable than we might know or appreciate at the moment?
That's an important question. And what I actually like to say is that artificial intelligence is a misnomer, right? There's nothing quite artificial about it when you realize that we still need the human intelligence to actually guide it and make sure that it's working well, and to ensure that the way that the results are being deployed also serve humanity and society. So in some ways, we really need to turn the focus back on human intelligence and ask about how the human input is working when creating this AI technologies, and also think about how we're evaluating the results, the decision-making that we're getting from these AI technologies.
Professor Ajunwa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. And I hope you all will be interested in my book, The Quantified Worker, which looks at AI technologies in the workplace.
Thank you so much for sharing that.